Everyone thought that the final event of the Thargoid War was when the ability to destroy Titans was finally added to the game. But during the destruction of the 7th of 8 Titans, Frontier began teasing the actual final event until November 28th, when the final Titan, Ko-Siho, or I've heard so many pronunciations of this Titan, I do not know what it's called, began to move, and Frontier released a trailer which just kinda nudges the idea that it's headed towards Sol. And as of December 5th, it landed, and was not only invading Sol, but parked right above Earth. It's fully invading the core worlds. In my previous video covering the first final event, a lot of newcomers didn't understand the context of the years leading up to all of this in-game. So very quickly, let's see how we got here. The story begins in 3301, or 9 real-life years ago. During this time, old Elite canon from the 1980s had been retconned, and the community wasn't entirely sure what was and what wasn't. Apparently, humanity had yet to even make first contact with the Thargoids, which were heavily present in the original franchise, until around 3303, or 7 real-life years ago, when Thargoids were formerly added to the game. When players began experiencing hyperdictions. This would later be revealed to be a thing Thargoid interceptors could do, where they pull you out of a hyperspace jump and throw you into normal space, where you are then scanned. Sometimes this ended violently, but most are simple stop-and scans, where you are let go depending on the cargo in your ship. If you did manage to kill an interceptor, it would bleed caustic, and overall they used caustic a lot, even as a weapon. A familiar sci-fi trait, I'm sure. Eventually, active and inactive surface sites were discovered, and depending on how you would interface with them, they'd either display a beautiful map of the Milky Way, or try to kill you. It became obvious that the Thargoids were biomechanics in nature, but much as before, the community wasn't sure which aspects about them had been retconned either. And to this day, Frontier has adopted that idea of not knowing. A lot of the Thargoid storyline is kinda both show not tell and tell not show at the same time. Usually, in the past, Frontier have hidden stuff in the game that hints at the overarching story, but usually this amounts in logs that give more context, almost kinda like an ARG, where you dig through little puzzles or some kind of obfuscation, and then it just kind of reveals itself in a log. Through this in-game process, as well as devs moving things along with community goals and other gameplay stuff, the player base learned that the retcon was lying. Breadcrumb trails leading through voice logs from abandoned settlements revealed that not only had humanity encountered Thargoids in the past, but had already experienced a violent galactic Cold War with them, which was totally covered up. This happened over 150 years prior, so that makes the current encounter with the Thargoids, which began 7 real-life years ago, technically the second Thargoid War. Although not dissimilar to the previous one, this wasn't some loud, ever-evolving conflict. There were loud moments, but in fact, to the experienced players, Thargoids became almost like the mysterious wildlife of the Milky Way galaxy after time, which inhabits places like the Coalsack, Witchhead, and Pleiades nebulae, can be observed taking human escape pods out of wreckage, and aren't even hostile sometimes at all. Another mystery surrounding them became what a hive ship looks like. One day, a wreck was discovered on a pretty unremarkable moon. Ship logs revealed that it had belonged to a Commander Jameson, which is who you played as in the original game. The logs depict his journey in attacking a Thargoid mothership, or hive ship, which told players that they do indeed exist, but the players haven't seen one yet. And they wouldn't for a very long time. Until, and to skip another long and complicated story, involving one galactic stick being poked into one galactic beehive, 8 Thargoid Titans began invading the bubble of human-occupied space. Galnet News Digest has a great video covering all of this. But when the invasion began in 3308, or 2 real-life years ago, we not only had the answers to what a hive ship, mothership thing looks like, but saw a change in mentality from Frontier as to what the Thargoids are in Elite. Instead of the more static presence the Thargoids have seen outside of some incursions on the bubble, the invasion saw them turn into an entire galactic conflict game system, which over the years developed different ship types with different roles, logistical surface sites that can be sabotaged with a little minigame, and eventually good old-fashioned bombing the mothership. And once again, during this event, Frontier shakes up the dynamic a little bit, perhaps one last time. Now, instead of being surrounded by the Titans, we surround it, our logistics pushing in on their logistics. And like I said before, this isn't just a situation where the Titan is invading Sol and we are bombing Sol. It's invaded the core worlds of the bubble. What this means is Thargoid invasion forces are pushing outward from the Titan, which in gameplay terms serves as a defended deployment point, from which Thargoids crawl into surrounding star systems and capture them. When a Titan has enough star systems, it gains a massive amount of damage resistance, and is effectively invincible. There's a lot of activities players can engage in to contribute to the war effort though. It's not just combat, but evacuating civilians right before and during the invasion, repairing and restoring destroyed surface settlements, and delivering logistics to star systems after the star system has been retaken to repair starports and recolonize it. There's other stuff as well, but let's keep this under an hour long. Now, me personally, I was participating more in surface and port defense, which is interceptor combat for the most part. Interceptor combat is one of the most satisfying points of progression in Elite, and it is very difficult, very skill-based, but very rewarding. The community loves to call them murder flowers because of their incredibly unique design. There's like 4 different variants of them, each of which have their own little differences between them, but mostly it's just like difficulty, speed, damage, etc. And seriously, this is probably my favorite alien ship design I've seen. And their sound design is insane. And the fight itself is often quite sobering to one's gamer ego. To kill an interceptor, you don't just shoot at it until health bar hits 0 in the conventional way. They have a pretty tough shield, and even if you knock them down and deal damage to the hull, it will regenerate. The key to dealing actual damage to an interceptor is to deal enough damage to its hull until one of its 8 hearts is exerted, in which it will glow red. This is when you focus fire on that heart until it breaks off, or taking the petal off of the murder flower. When you do this, it will take permanent hull damage. There's a lot to take care of while doing this though. Not only is the Thargoid shooting at you, but it deploys a swarm when aggroed that deals a ton of damage and has its own level of strategy to deal with. Not to mention, getting too close to the thing has a chance of getting your modules fried. Oh, and it also launches a pulse that temporarily shuts your ship down when it panics. There is a way to counter this, but again, multitasking. Not to mention also caustic missiles that will melt your ship if you don't have the proper outfitting or heat management to deal with it. And you gotta keep your ship cold during the entire fight. When your ship temperature is below 20, Thargoids have a harder time targeting you, and if you orbit the Thargoid in a certain way while fighting it, it cannot hit you with its main attack. This is called cold orbiting. To do this, it is heavily recommended to use a beam laser with thermal vent engineering, partnered with long range as well, so you can vent your heat back into the interceptor while shooting at it. There is no engineering AX combat, but it's even harder. Thing is, this is all considering if you're fighting a Thargoid one-on-one, or maybe with one friend. Thargoid hunting is a sport, and if you ever manage to solo a Hydra, it is one of the most prestigious accomplishments the community recognizes. It is very, very hard. Interceptors are often called Elite's raid boss, or Dark Souls boss, and they earn that title. But this dynamic switches up quite a bit with surface and spaceport defense. The most obvious thing is restock and repair are available in instance. At surface ports, interceptors don't deploy Swarm at all, and at spaceports, because of the amount of players or NPCs, Swarm isn't often targeting you, and if you run, it'll probably aggro onto someone else. Plus, the neutralizer module that counters the shutdown pulse has a radius, so if you're close to a player that counters it, it won't affect you. The way that a defense instance is cleared is by progressing through an initial wave of scouts. Once they are destroyed, interceptors jump in, and you fight waves and waves of them. Most of them will be Cyclopses and Basilisks, which mean if you have a competent instance of players, you'll carve through them pretty quickly, making lots and lots of credits, as you get the combat bonds for simply damaging them, as long as you are there when they are killed. Although, things get much harder for the final wave, when several Hydras jump in, and if you have ever fought one before, you know just how much these instances slow down at this point. Often you don't even deal enough damage to break the heart off during one exertion, so you have to slowly whittle this thing down, especially considering you have to destroy most of its hearts to get its health low enough to zero it at all. And if you don't have players around competent enough to kill it, it won't go down, unless you yourself are a god. And even then, dig in, it's gonna be a while. But expectedly, this is also when the big money of the instance is made. One Hydra kill is worth 60 million credits, which means you'll get at least 120 mil from the kills alone per instance, not counting the kills for the other interceptor waves before. Plus, when you finally do kill the Hydras, you are given an extra 50 million credits for winning the instance. It's easy to see how one could make billions farming these instances, especially if you mission stack, but that requires you to get the killing blow. Ultimately, though, through players participating in all of these actions enough, we carved through the core systems in a matter of days. Within a week, we were on the Titan's doorstep with no systems remaining, its damage resistance dropped, and the final Titan bombing ready to begin. To prepare for this, I went through the process of retrofitting and even scraping together a totally new Titan bomber to really shine during the finale. I made a whole video about how I did it here, but now it's time to actually bomb the Titan, which is yet another gameplay loop in which a ton of multitasking is involved. I like to describe Titan combat as a complete endurance test. How fast can your ship go? How much damage can it deal with? How cold can it stay? How much caustic can it handle? Firstly, you'll have to get to the Titan itself by landing in the Maelstrom, a giant storm cloud of caustic, filled with mines that will track you by heat if you get too close without silent running. Interceptors are patrolling as well, although you'll rarely run into them. The deeper towards the core you get, the higher the level of caustic damage you take. It's recommended to stock at least one caustic sink launcher or a repair limpet controller paired with burning off caustic manually to get through this. You'll also have to consider for the Titan's pulse it fires into the Maelstrom, which is a bigger, more deadly version of the interceptor pulse that knocks you offline, dealing a lot of damage to your hull and internals as you get hit with massive amount of heat, and knocks you back thousands of meters a second. Plus, since your ship's offline, your caustic sinks aren't powered, so you're melting too. Also, similarly to the interceptor pulse, there's a neutralizer that handles this as well. Heat sinks are good to have here unless you silent run. After successfully flying through the caustic cloud, you'll be met with an asteroid field, in the center of which is the Titan. Finally, we can begin to bomb it. Keeping your ship under 20% heat, you can sneak underneath the Titan and wait for its heat vents to open. If you use a beam laser to do this, the Titan's alert state jumps up by 1, meaning there are more patrols around looking. But this is usually reasonably easy to evade if you don't mind taking occasional damage. Once the vents open, you fire a Guardian nanite torpedo into it, causing it to close. This will cause the Titan to emergency vent its heat from the thermal core itself. The more vents you close, the longer the core is open. Once venting begins, you deal as much damage as possible to it. To deal permanent damage to the Titan, you can knock the core's health down to 0, causing a reset. Once it closes again, the Titan will fire its Taurus, a giant electric field surrounding the Titan that will fry your ship. It's pretty easy to evade once you get used to it. Do this over and over again, restocking and repairing when necessary, and you will eventually eat through its 8 hearts. There are many different kinds of ships people use in this arena. In public instances, you'll spot a lot of core damage builds, ships that aren't even capable of closing vents, but deal a ton of core damage. You'll see support ships built with repair limpet controllers and cargo space to heal your hull. These are also usually core damagers, but the crown ship of Titan combat is the hybrid bomber, capable of both closing vents and dealing a lot of core damage. The best of these ships is the Python Mark II. Hybrid bombers are capable of technically soloing a Titan. You can choose to engineer your ship with Guardian resistance to bring in Guardian weapons for max damage, or load up on enhanced AX missile racks to deal less but still respectable damage. And after days of constant bombardment and restocking at Mars High, all the hearts were knocked down to 0. At that very moment, a 24-hour meltdown stage began. During this period, the Titan is in total panic mode. You'll see tons of Thargoid ships evacuating from the Titan. It'll begin to crackle as smaller explosions burst out of its hull. And of course, it turns bright red. It's during this time rescue operating players are stressing, because there are kidnapped humans trapped on the Titan's hull, and players are tasked to evacuate as many as humanly possible before that 24-hour timer hits 0, when a total meltdown takes place. So, what happens now? Well, the jobs for player groups like Operation Ida begins, in which mass logistics deliveries happen to repair and online abandoned starports. And slowly, these star systems will recover. Over 2 billion citizens were displaced during the invasion of Sol. Elite's sim tracked all of it. Every ship destroyed, civilian evacuated or rescued from a Titan, every shot damaging the core, every shipment for repair, every settlement power regulator replaced, every spire site sabotaged, every Orthrus mulched. This event is what reminds players of how insanely special of a game Elite is. During the early invasion, the Brazilian Pilots League was one of the first player groups that had their star systems they owned ravaged, and there was a huge player effort to rescue them. Back during the construction of the aforementioned galactic beehive poker, there was a player group called the Witch Hunt that fought back against the players delivering the construction materials. They were so persistent with this, Frontier canonized them. All the new modules that were designed for all these gameplay loops weren't just added to the Game 1 update. The players completed a community goal which led to the module's development. In the very beginning, Frontier kind of half-warned the players that they are letting this thing go. If the players lose, they lose, and considering what the Thargoids were attacking were actual play spaces required for the game to function, this whole gameplay system was extremely bold. Now, would the players have ever let the bubble burn? No, and realistically Frontier wouldn't have either. But I started playing Elite for real in 2022, the year this event began. And to see it go is a very odd feeling. I'm so used to seeing those red icons burning through the outer bubble, it's weird to see them gone. This event saw Elite through its literal lowest point it's ever been in, and its extremely surprising resurgence since. What happens next? I don't know. No one does. Are all these gameplay loops, all these systems Frontier spent years developing just gone? I don't know. I don't really think so, but Frontier's approach with Elite is one of the most unconventional out there, for better and worse. Spending who knows how much money on an alien war sim just to let it go for the players that participated to have a special memory of it is totally something Frontier would do. It's kind of a persistent trait of the game. If you've ever talked to an Elite veteran, they'll always talk about how things were back in their day, whether it be some difference in engineering that made it somehow even worse than you thought, or some insane commodity rush that earned them billions and sparked blockades and major player conflicts, or their experience being at the front lines of some new storyline that is established lore by the time you started playing, and now that experience is something I share. I remember what it was like seeing Elite hit its all-time low the day it happened. I remember the pure excitement the day the Proteus wave went off, the day that Thargoids appeared and slowly approached the bubble, waking up every day with it inching closer and closer, the day the Kingfisher was attacked. I remember in 2023, everyone feeling like we were one update away from maintenance mode, the day the Titans became actually accessible, the day that we could kill them for the first time, the gold rush that got me my carrier. And now, every time a new player logs in and finally gets to Sol for the first time after learning what the federal rep grind is, they'll see this, and I get to say, yeah, I helped kill that thing. And that's special. This whole thing, this whole game is so busted, flawed, frustrating, but it's so unbelievably special. What a surprise it was that 2024 ended up being the year where Elite came back. And I'm very excited to see what comes in 2025. The Thargoid storyline is definitely not over. Around the time of the final Titan's death, signals started emitting from the wreckage of all of the Titans, with this image embedded in its audio. There is still a couple storylines that haven't even seen their conclusion yet, and we still have yet to see a Thargoid, like a thing with legs and arms. We haven't seen that yet through the entire war so far, and they basically confirmed that there's more to the storyline in an interview during the 10-year celebration. And in the final Frontier Unlocked for the year, they announced that just like in 2024, in the very first Frontier Unlocked for next year, they're going to announce the roadmap for 2025, and they already have quite a bit going for it. So it feels weird that 10 years after this game has come out, it feels like just now the ball really starts rolling. Like after this giant Thargoid thing, we had 2024 running alongside it, where we got 4 new ships, we got power plays overhaul, the engineering rebalance. It was just a good year for the game, plus, you know, all the Thargoid stuff. And then we had system colonization announced. That's not even out yet. It will be relatively soon. It's going to release in beta, and this whole Thargoid War thing really helped the wallet out, so I can afford that update when it does come out, so I can, you know, claim my star system and start doing that. And, well, I guess there's even more after that. I was pretty convinced 2024 was this outlier year, and I thought 2025 was going to be pretty quiet because this pace is hard to keep up, but guess we'll see in that Frontier Unlocked coming up. Thank you for watching my videos this year. This channel was an unbelievable surprise to me. I started by just making little Elite cinematics that I really liked making because I became very passionate with this game over the last, you know, about year and a half, and it feels good to make content that people receive well. And I hope to make more. Thank you for 2024, and well, let's see what happens next.